Growing up, my street was full of lively kids, and we'd play outside late into summer evenings, our parents all friends. Then, two new boys, twins, started at my school. They were introduced as living nearby, right on my street, and we were all encouraged to make them feel welcome. But I distinctly remember being terrified of them immediately. They looked incredibly gaunt, with tired, sunken eyes and cold, dull-looking skin, and you couldn't tell them apart. Throughout school, they were glued to each other, avoiding everyone despite our best efforts. They'd just stare at the floor, shunning all human interaction. Eventually, my friends and I just forgot they existed. That was until one summer evening. We were playing outside, and they appeared in the street, standing in the middle of the road, staring at the floor. Out of nowhere, one of them launched a rock at a friend, hitting him hard on the back and leaving a huge bruise. One of the more confident boys approached them, asking what the deal was. They both looked up simultaneously, said something to him, and then just walked away. During this, I happened to look towards their house and saw a male figure leering at the window. The moment he saw me looking, he swiftly drew the curtains closed, even though it was still broad daylight. That's when I started realizing this family was weird as hell. The boy who got hit never told us what the twins said, just asked us to stop asking. They never played, they just lingered in the street, watching all of us, always glaring, never interacting. I even remember seeing one of them kick a live cat across the street while the other chased it away when it landed. This went on for years. Eventually, some kids moved away, leaving only me and one other boy from the original gang. We were about 13 or 14 now, venturing further than our street to play. One night, we were playing football when the twins approached us. One of them kicked the ball so hard it flew miles into the woods nearby. My friend started to complain, but before he could finish, one twin launched an uppercut to his face, lifting him off his feet and rendering him unconscious. I froze, and shortly after began to scream. The twins just walked slowly past me. One pushed me hard to the floor, and the other made a kicking motion towards my head, which I ducked. Then they walked off perfectly in sync. I immediately ran for an ambulance. After paramedics checked us, we were returned home to two aggravated and concerned parents. Later that evening, the twins' father appeared on our doorstep, hysterically accusing my friend and me of bullying and provoking the twins into the assault, threatening my parents that we would regret provoking them. After this, we both just stopped playing outside because we were terrified of the twins. They were constantly in fights at school, not just scuffles, but actual violent assaults, causing many victims to need hospital treatment, until eventually, they were suspended for good. They finally moved from our street, and I didn't hear of them for years. Fast forward about 10 years. An old school friend and I were catching up, and they told me how they found out that the twins were beaten and neglected by their father growing up. Apparently, the father trained one twin in jiu-jitsu almost every day, and they lived a very regimented life. There were also claims of sexual abuse, but I'm not too certain how much weight all that holds. Part of me feels sorry for them, but the other part wonders what horrific crimes they went on to commit in adult life. Another part of me wonders if they would ever try to target me and the gang and come back for us in adult life, even though we did nothing wrong. I have no other information about them currently, but yeah, deranged twins. I hope we never meet again. This happened about 4 years ago, when I was 15. I used to go to the school pool for a swim after school, around 5 or 6 p.m. There weren't many people there then, which was perfect for me, because I don't like spending my free time in crowded places, and it meant I could swim freely. You guys may be familiar with high school bathroom stalls. They have a door, but below it, there's a space large enough for you to see other people's feet. Well, this is what happened. After my swim, I got out of the pool and went straight to a bathroom stall to take a shower. Before that, I noticed there were only me and one other person in the pool center. I didn't think much about it, but while I was showering, I had this kind of strange feeling. I turned around. Remember that space between the door and the ground? Well, that person was lying on his back and watching me shower. I was terrified. Then he asked me if he could suck my dick. I don't remember exactly how I reacted, but I'm pretty sure I yelled, "Get the hell out," and tried to kick his face, missing. I quickly changed my clothes and got out of the pool. As I rode my bicycle home, I heard whistles from behind me. Wolf whistles like the ones in the movies where the hot lady gets them after walking past several men. To this day, I don't go to the pool for a swim anymore because of what happened. Thinking back, it was not only creepy, but also really gross. I mean, it's a lie down in the bathroom where people walk on and piss on. I don't get why he had the nerve to do that. After the incident, I read somewhere that the pool had a bad reputation because of these creepers. In fact, one victim was sexually assaulted in one of the stalls and contracted AIDS. It's really chilling when I think about what could have happened to me that day. So last week, I told a story about a woman named Agnes who was in the back of a van and who bit me. I hope you guys remember because some of you asked if I'd recount the story that led me to finally quit my driving job. A few weeks after the Agnes situation, we got a new director and a new charge nurse. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe things got better and patients stinking up the vans would be a thing of the past, you'd be wrong. Neither of them gave a damn about the patients under their care. In fact, both were carrying on an affair with each other, which had led them to be let go from their previous employer. They like to stay holed up in the director's office, just pretending to work, if you catch my drift. Anyway, on with the story. I pulled up Saturday morning, and it was utter chaos. It turns out that a patient got out of his room, and not just any patient, but a patient who for the past 2 weeks hadn't been receiving his meds for his paranoid schizophrenia because the head nurse didn't believe he suffered from it and thought he was being over-medicated. Not to mention that the patient had on his chart that he was extremely combative and needed medication, and Nurse Ratchet decided he didn't need it because we needed to cut costs. I mean, this guy had caught an unaware janitor and beat him pretty good with a mop bucket, and he was loose now. Obviously, the police were called, right? No. The board of directors told staff that no one was to call the police except them, and that was the last resort. The poor janitor, who was bloody and battered, was taken to the medical bay so Nurse Ratchet could fix him up. Meanwhile, I had to join the search for the patient. So myself, 2 orderlies, and a security guard who was pushing 70 started looking. Against my better judgment, we broke off into groups of 2, opening doors and calling the patient's name. We went into the first cafeteria in the dementia ward, the ward that has residents with memory loss, more severe physical issues, anyone like Agnes who tended to wander off. Basically, except the design was flawed as hell, but residents still got in and out. But in the cafeteria or the big rec rooms, the door was behind you, so someone would have to come and let you out if you got locked in. So we're in the cafeteria looking around, and I hear a huge bang from the kitchen, like someone pushing over something heavy. Myself and the orderly that was with me went running, and there he was, the patient, trying to rip the bars off the window and escape. The orderly, like an idiot, pressed his radio, and the second the patient heard that sound, he moved towards us with a huge metal soup ladle and a Phillips screwdriver in his hand. Thank God they kept the knives locked up, but still. I'm a big guy, but this patient was easily 6'5" and 300 plus pounds. The orderly was radioing for help, and I was throwing things at this guy who's got murder in his eyes. No lie, I've seen some pretty messed up stuff in the Marines, but this guy's dead eyes will still haunt me forever. And then he was on me, and I was doing my best to keep him from gutting me with a screwdriver when he just started choking me with his bare hands. I was getting some good punches in, but he felt no pain. The orderly realized, oh crap, I'm being choked to death, and he jumped on his back and started wailing on this guy. Well, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was being put on a stretcher. My trachea was so bruised that I couldn't talk past a whisper for weeks. I came very close to actually dying, but thankfully, the orderly got a hold of a cast iron pan and whacked the patient unconscious. As you can imagine, both the director and the charge nurse were let go pretty quickly and included in a lawsuit brought against them by the board of directors of long-term care, and by myself, the janitor, and the orderly, and the family of the patient too. It also caused a huge shake-up in the facility, and in my efforts since then, things have run a whole lot better. As for me, I quit even though I was offered a raise. Last I heard, the patient got back onto his meds and was eventually released into the care of his family. This story is so weird that I almost pushed it out of my mind, but my friend reminded me of it last night, and now I'm creeped out all over again. I was around 15 or 16, and I was on vacation at Walt Disney World. My family has a vacation club membership, so we go a few times a year, and we live pretty closely anyway. We were staying in the vacation club villas, which is a separate building from the main hotel. I brought two of my friends, Savannah and Victoria, and we got bored around 2 a.m., so we went down to the gym. It's open 24 hours. We weren't going to work out or anything, just take mirror selfies and mess around with exercise balls and stuff. There's a desk for the spa portion of the gym, I think, or maybe it's a sauna. I don't really remember. But since it was so late and there were no employees, we were messing around behind the desk and we found a notebook. I'm not sure why, but I was super annoying at the time, and I decided to write my Twitter and Instagram handles, and so did Savannah. Looking back, I'm pretty sure that we could have gotten in trouble for this since guests aren't supposed to screw around with a desk and all. I didn't think much of it though, and we left the gym. The next morning, we checked out of the hotel. Well, on the drive back home, I get a notification, and it's from a diaper fetish account. The creepy thing is that this account had been active for a while and had disgusting pictures of grown men in diapers and other disturbing pictures of children. Savannah got one too, and we're both just sitting there looking at each other like, what the hell? The accounts tweeted at us saying something like, I know who you are and what you've done, and your vacation will end abruptly. They tweeted some more creepy stuff like telling us to eat what you have, Max, but I knew it was clearly because we left our names on the notepad. I didn't reply, and then I noticed a new follower, and it was my name, but the username was similar to the diaper account. But then the account started tweeting my address, my phone number, and random pictures of me from deep in my social media. They did the same thing with Savannah's name. At this point, we were both scared bricks. I got a text from a random number. I'm assuming they used a texting app, saying that they were watching us and knew more than we thought. They even started texting about my boyfriend at the time and asking really messed up questions about him. I told him to piss off, and then I just blocked it. I didn't get any more texts after this, but the Twitter accounts continued to tweet about me and random details that I knew they had to dig to find. I blocked them on that too, and put all my accounts on private, and I never got any more messages. But the Twitter accounts, they're still up to this day. Honestly, I don't know how they got my address and my phone number or all my information about me, but it creeps me out to think that there's some random fetish account out there, obviously started by a weirdo, that has all this information about me. This happened when I was about 16 years old. My mom and dad were going out on a date night and asked me to watch my sisters. At this time, they were 13 and 10. I'd watched them plenty of times before and had no issues. I just thought it would be like normal, watching movies and eating junk food. But since they wouldn't be home until almost midnight, I brought in my dog just in case. She's a miniature pinscher and was my guard dog. My friend abandoned her when she was just a few weeks old, and I kept her since. Sadly, she passed away last December. Anyway, everything was going fine until there was a knock at the door around 10 p.m. No one was supposed to be coming to the house. I decided to ignore it. However, the knocking persisted, and a man's voice said to open up and that it was the police. I was very suspicious, especially since my dog's hair was standing on end. So I sent my sisters to the basement, where my room was located at the time, and told them to just stay quiet. I then told my 13-year-old sister to call the police if I didn't come and get them in 10 minutes. Once I locked the door to my room, I grabbed the gun my dad keeps in the house for safety. I opened the door. My house has a screen door and then the main door, and I only opened the main door, keeping the chain on. Standing, there was a tall Caucasian male in a police uniform, except the uniform just didn't look quite right. He started saying that he needed to search my house because they had got a tip about my house being a drug house. When I asked to see his badge and a search warrant, he came up with this story about it being in the car down the street. I said that unless I saw both those items, I was not opening the door. He started getting violent and banging on the screen door, saying that I needed to open the door right now or I would be sorry. I told my dog attacking Latin likely meant attack him, and she immediately went into guard mode, putting herself in between me and the door and started barking at the fake officer. At this point, I yelled up to my sisters to call the police now and slammed the door shut. I ran down to the basement and stood outside the room where I had my sisters, guarding the door. I could hear the fake officer still yelling, and now I could also hear him talking to other people, multiple people. It must have been at my house at this point because I could now see multiple boots from the basement window. I had my sisters hide in the closet once I got confirmation that the police would be on their way, and just waited in the room with the door locked. A few minutes later, the actual police showed up. I had my sisters stay put and looked around, and a basement window was smashed in, but other than that, there was no damage. 3 guys were arrested, though, and apparently they were using this ploy to break into people's houses. The real cops took my statement, and soon after, my parents came home, worried sick. I didn't even realize how messed up this was at the time, but looking back, man, I feel kind of lucky. I haven't really had many encounters like this in my life because I'm a chubby male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19, I lived in Kentucky, pretty far away from my northern Michigan hometown. It was this little town called Pikeville where there was very little crime, and I actually kind of miss it and want to go back, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year, and we agreed to meet up at the Hotties in town the morning after they got here. Well, I got there a lot earlier than them, me being the type to show up 15 minutes early to everything, and them being the types to show up way late. As I was standing outside waiting, though, this guy walks up to me. If you've ever lived in a place like this, then you know everyone is super friendly, so it didn't strike me as odd when he started to talk to me. During our conversation, all kinds of alarm bells should have been going off. Like after he found out that I went to college, he said he saw me at a party. This is impossible, as I never really once went to a party. When he found out that I was a game nerd, he started talking about playing Dungeons and Dragons all the time. He kept taking sips out of some sort of alcohol bottle. Mind you, it's like 10 a.m. at this point, and he kept offering me some. There were a few other things like this, but I think you get the drift. He started talking about how he lost all his friends because he got into drugs, and I felt a little bad for him, if I'm being honest. He asked if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a while, I went. The guy had been talking about how he lost all his friends due to drugs, and I felt bad for the guy. That, coupled with the fact that I hadn't had any encounters like this and the lack of crime, kind of disarmed that warning part of my brain. We walked and talked for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized that we were now in a shady-looking part of town. I never even realized there were shady parts of this small town, but here we were. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned, with this dark, narrow, sketchy alley next to it. He starts talking about how he knows 2 girls that live here, how they like to party and whatnot. He tells me about how DTF they are and asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point that my common sense finally kicked in. I mean, I'm in a shitty part of town with a sketchy guy that I don't know who is just talking about doing hard drugs, and no one knows that I'm here too. And now he wants me to go into an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined this offer and immediately said that I needed to get back as my family was probably waiting. He seemed a little upset about this, and then asked if I could help him move a pool table into his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined this as well, and this is when he began to reach into his jacket pocket. Those bells started going off, and I realized just how much this guy looked like he was going to stab me, and this terrified me. At that moment, my stepmother did the only kind thing she's ever done for me. She called to see where I was. I took this as an opportunity to hastily exit, and the creep followed me for like 3 blocks. To this day, I don't know exactly what this guy wanted, but it was probably just a robbery. Still, that area has a good amount of disappearances and is one of the worst areas in the county for human trafficking, apparently. I only found this out afterwards. I don't know what would have happened had I agreed to help, but I can't help but think of that one scene from Silence of the Lambs where Bill lures a victim into his van. Well, I do hope that he got the help he needed and he's doing better, but I also hope just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into someone like that again. This happened late last summer. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I live in a house with my husband. We live in a really large city on a street with row homes, and my house is on the end of the block. It's very common for us to have door-to-door solicitors where I live. My husband recently got a new job, and as part of his training, he needed to fly to Texas and stay for 2 weeks at the company corporate training center. Well, I wasn't thrilled at the idea of being home alone for 2 weeks, of course, but I decided that it was time to put on my big girl panties and get over it. I mean, how bad could it be, right? I could watch all the shows my husband hates, cook the food he doesn't like to eat. It would be fine. So he leaves for his work trip, and I continue on with my regular routine. I work part-time, about 20 hours a week, so I spend a lot of time at home binge-watching TV and cleaning the house. But one day, I'm sitting on the couch and I hear a knock at my door and assume it's the delivery person leaving a package. I wait to hear the glass storm door close, indicating the delivery driver has left, and I hear nothing. And then another knock. I am kind of antisocial, so I didn't feel like dealing with any solicitors or anything, and I ignore the person and just keep watching TV. I hear another knock, and I pause the show and get up to peek out the front window, and there's a man at the front door that I don't recognize. So I don't open the door for him, and I see him kind of throw up his hands in frustration and then just leave. I'm creeped out by it, but don't think of it again for a few more days. I come home from work a few days later, and I start cooking something for dinner. I'm in the middle of washing some dishes when I hear a knock at the door again. I go to peek at the blinds and see the man from a few days before with another guy this time. Just to paint a picture for you, the first man, the one who has been there twice, is a huge guy. Honestly, he looks almost like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. I mean, he's huge, muscular, and tall, and he's holding a clipboard. The guy with him is a skinny, black guy. They're not very tall, but taller than I am, 5 feet 6 inches. The guy holding the clipboard knocks again, and I open the main door to the house. The glass door is still locked, and I just look at them and say, "Can I help you?" And they say, "Yeah, we're here to set up a security system. We're from the large national security company. Now, I own my own house, and I bought it before my husband and I even met, and we didn't have a security system installed, and I hadn't set up an appointment with anyone either." I said to them, "I'm pretty sure that you have the wrong house, and I haven't set up an appointment with anyone." But they say, "Your husband probably made the appointment and just forgot to tell you." My husband and I, we never make any major decisions about stuff like this without talking to each other first, so I say to him, "I don't think so." And he holds his clipboard out to show me that my address is filled onto his form, and he says that I can check it out. But for some reason, I unlock the glass door to take a look at it. Maybe my husband really did forget to tell me that they were coming? I mean, he is away for 2 weeks. Maybe he wanted to try and make me feel safer by getting an alarm installed. The form looks pretty generic, and it doesn't have either of our names on it. They then say to me that we just have to come inside and check for weak points so we can find out where to install the sensor. It won't take long. The guy's partner, who hasn't spoken yet, nods in agreement. I tell them, "Well, I'm home by myself right now because my husband is at work, so I don't really feel comfortable having you inside." They say, "We're really from a large national security company," and the skinny guy holds out his name badge. I reply with, "I could print out a name badge that says I'm the Pope, but that doesn't mean anything," sarcastically. They look annoyed now, and The Rock starts motioning like he's going to try and come in the door. So I told them, "I'm sorry, but I'm canceling their services and to leave." The Rock seems mad at this point and starts pushing against the door that I have halfway open and is looking down at me like he's going to stomp on me. He says to me, "We really need to come inside and take care of this now," looking past me into my living room. By now, I'm really mad that they're being so persistent about getting in when I've already told them no. So I told them to leave, and I'll reschedule my appointment for a different day. Well, I shut the door in their faces and lock it, waiting for them to leave. But they stay there for a few minutes before walking away, and I wanted to see what car they got in, but they left on foot and started walking down the block. Once I was sure that they had gone, I texted my husband, and he said that he had no idea who they were. I immediately Googled the phone number for the large national security company, and then explained to the woman on the line what happened. She tells me that the men weren't from the company, and she had no record on file that I ever made any appointments with them, and now I'm really creeped out. She suggests that I go make a police statement. I went to talk to the police, and they said that they don't know what they can really do since I don't have any information about the men. I told them, though, that I'm going to be home alone for at least another week, and it would make me feel better if they can drive around my neighborhood a few times a day just to keep an eye out for them, if they could. They agreed to do so, and I just go home. Now, after this incident, I made sure I had every window and door locked and tried to forget about it. The following week, I got to lunch with my mom somewhere in the city, and now we come back to my house to hang out for a bit, and my next door neighbor is outside. My mom has a medic yet, likely Medicat, a typo in source, so I introduced them, and we're standing outside of my house chatting when a plain, unmarked, regular old car pulls up. A woman walks up the steps and asks which one of us lives at 123 East Street, and I tell her that I do. She says, "Hi, I'm from large national security company, and my partner was here a few days ago to do an installation, but you wouldn't let him in." At this point, I looked embarrassed and just started laughing. I said that I felt like such an idiot and that I actually filed a report with the police about them because I was really nervous. And I'm sure you understand being home alone and being a woman, strange men at the door and all that. But then she looks at me furiously and says, "Are you kidding me?" and screams at me that you're ridiculous and I'm leaving. She turns back to her car, slams on the gas, and screeches away out of the neighborhood. To this day, I have no idea who these people were, what they wanted, or why she was so pissed about it all. All I know is that neither my husband nor I called them, and they definitely don't work for the company they claim to. And now we indeed do have a security system. This happened when I was about 7 years old. My sister and I had invited our neighbor, who was around our age, to come over for a movie night. Our neighborhood is pretty old, so the houses aren't far apart or super close together like most neighborhoods are these days. It's also a very hilly neighborhood with tons of trees everywhere. The neighbor's house was beside my driveway, less than a 2-minute walk to her front door anyway. After about 2 hours of pizza, Scooby-Doo, and girl talk, it was about 11 o'clock, so we decided to walk her home. As we started walking towards her house, we noticed a black truck parked at the end of the yard, up by the road. Nothing too odd, people park like that all the time here. Right as we all stepped off my driveway, though, and into her yard, a huge hooded figure stepped out from behind one of the far trees in her yard. We froze, not sure if we were seeing things or if it was actually a real person. After about 30 seconds, we started backing up, trying not to lose eye contact with the figure, and that's when he started walking slowly, getting faster with every step. By the time that we hit my driveway, he was stepping onto hers, and we booked it, sprinting for the door. He also started running at this point, and all of us screamed and ran into my garage and locked the wooden door behind us. Our screams were so loud that my mother and grandmother heard us and met us at the door. At this point, all three of us were freaking the hell out, trying to explain to my mom and my grandma what happened. We told them that a man had chased us, and my mom called my friend's house to see if they saw anything outside. My friend's grandma said that they didn't see a truck or a man. My mom ended up walking with us this time, since we were all too scared to walk alone, when we went to my friend's house. My friend's grandma told us what we had seen was the pizza man. Even in my 7-year-old mind, I knew that was a lie, because, well, what pizza man hides in a tree? Also, the only other car was the truck, which didn't have a pizza place logo. Anyway, about 2 years later, we found out who the hooded man was. It ended up being my friend's 45-year-old uncle, who allegedly was a known meth addict. Apparently, he was super out of it that night, and according to our grandma, he just wanted to play a prank on us. But I really don't believe that. I honestly think that there was something more sinister at play. I grew up in Long Beach, California, from the ages of 2 to 11. There were a lot of us living near each other, and I had 2 older sisters, and my next-door neighbors were my cousins, the 5 of them, and who I'll be focusing on, the oldest of those cousins. His name was Christian. He was one of the most sadistic people that I had ever met. He enjoyed wrecking my Lego towers, giving me wedgies until I bled, putting a pillow on my face and sitting on it. He even used my head like a step stool once. I was too young to just properly defend myself. Well, I had a stuffed animal at the time, a Dalmatian that I had named Dale. And Christian took Dale and put him in the oven and duct taped me to a chair with the oven light on in front of me, so I could do nothing but watch his Dale, my best friend, just burn alive, at least in my child mind. Needless to say, Christian was just one messed up individual. But I knew something was wrong when I saw him with that cat, Precious. He would use Precious's tail as a handle and swing her around, sometimes throwing her at the couch, but sometimes throwing her at the wall too. He laughed especially hard when he heard the sharp little thud. And unfortunately, she died. My parents told me that she ran away, but I knew that they were lying. It didn't occur to me until years later, but eventually I understood the truth. One night, my sisters had all their cousins over, and they wanted to play with a Ouija board. I was a little frightened, so I stepped out into our backyard, away from the Ouija board, and Christian followed me outside. He walked up behind me and pressed a knife to my throat, a serrated one from the kitchen. He was whispering things like, "What would you do if I killed you? I'm going to cut your neck and bleed you out. Why are you crying now?" By this time, I was obviously hysterical. I was a 9-year-old boy sobbing and pleading for my life. Before my sister came out and asked why I was crying so hard, Christian put the knife down so she didn't see it. I remember running to her, clinging to her like she was my savior, and for all I know, she may really have been. Christian tried to lie, telling her that I was being a baby about the Ouija board, but I was so terrified and hysterical that I screamed that he was lying. I told her that he put a knife to my neck. She held me and took me inside, calling my parents. When they came home, everything was away and everyone was gone except my sisters and me, and I was still coming down from the terror. Christian was ordered by my uncle Gene to never come near me again, and it worked. They moved a few months later, and in that time I only saw Christian at family outings, and he would never talk to me. I was always kept within arm's length of anyone who was safe when he was around. My dad brought me to the bathroom, and my mom's left hand was devoted to holding my right. He just never got the opportunity to catch me alone again. Now we're all adults, and we all have social media accounts. Christian tries to add me on Facebook and my other social media outlets, but I block him, and a few months later, another of his accounts will try to add me. For what it's worth, I really hope that I never see him again at another family gathering, which is not likely since he was disowned by Uncle Gene a few years later. I don't know what he did to piss off my uncle so bad, because my uncle is actually a really good guy, but I can only imagine that it was not good. So I grew up in a small town in New Zealand and had recently moved to a big city for university. The town I grew up in was really rough and a gang-orientated place, so I was always somewhat wary of strangers. Living in a big city was awesome because I got to go shopping in malls and Kmart, and a Kmart in New Zealand is probably the equivalent of Walmart in the US, but Kiwis seem to just love it a lot anyway. One day I was shopping at Kmart, just looking at the dog beds, which were at the back. I love the store. Kmart is huge here, and the back of aisle is the entire length of the store, in fact. I get this feeling that I'm being watched, and I see an old man in a mobility scooter at the opposite end, just staring at me. I gave him a smile and turned back to browsing when, in my peripheral, I see him racing towards me in this scooter at a great high speed. I immediately assume that his urgency must mean that he needs some help reaching or finding something, so I turned to face him. He was just a harmless old man, right? Wrong. He quickly starts chatting with me and sharing personal things with me, but they aren't actually greeting me. He starts telling me how I look like his wife, who passed when she was younger. Then he starts telling me how lonely he is, so I start to feel a lot of pity for him. And then the conversation starts taking a weird turn. He starts telling me how he likes to dress up and feel sexy in women's clothing. Then he starts to open his mouth and show me his missing teeth and gums. The sudden tone of conversation startles me, and I start to realize that I need to end this and leave him immediately. After several attempts at saying goodbye, he finally agrees to let me go and holds out his hand for a goodbye handshake. Desperate to leave, I agreed to shake his hand in order for him to just leave me alone. But suddenly, his grip tightens and I can't pull my hand away. He forces my hand towards his mouth and begins to make out with the back of it while swishing his tongue across it in circles. I aggressively pull my hand away and sprint out of the store in shock. The air from running makes the back of my hand feel cold and slimy, so I run to the mall toilets and scrub my hand for a solid 10 minutes, vowing to never let him talk to me again. And so I thought that I'd never see him again until just recently. I was on the bus to uni when he gets on, without his mobility scooter, and with a walking stick instead. Thankfully, I had someone already sitting next to me, so I felt safe. However, his eyes scanned the bus, and when they met mine, he immediately smirked. So when the bus got to the interchange where everyone gets off and gets onto other buses, I quickly rushed off the bus so I wouldn't have to see him. I felt my stomach hit the floor when I hear him calling after me. I glanced over my shoulder to see him waving his walking stick, yelling and pursuing after me. I quickly rush out into a shopping store to lose him, which is thankfully a success. The rest of the day goes fine until I got to return home and see that he is waiting at the stop that I board my bus at. I hurried, and so I can see my bus coming. Then he's looking around and starts to wander away from the bus stop, which is my cue to quickly board. I jump in line and quickly board. However, he has spotted me and is waving his stick and yelling after me again. I start to panic as I don't want to be trapped in a bus with him, and he's just about to step on the bus when the driver all of a sudden just slams the doors on him. This makes him furious, and he starts smashing his walking stick against the window and shouting. I look at the driver, who just smiles at me and gives me a nod and starts to pull away onto the road. Honestly, I'm totally overjoyed that this kind driver has literally just saved me from this creepy old man. So I step up to the window that he's hitting and stare directly at him with the filthiest look that I can give as the bus is slowly driving away. I literally felt like I got some power back at that moment, and I later found out that this old man is a well-known creep in the community, which makes me so grateful that the bus driver saved me that day. It was the first Tuesday of the Pennsylvania deer rifle season, December 3rd of 2013. I've always been an avid hunter, and I would wake up early in the morning to get into the woods before daylight. I would be in the woods at 4:30 in the morning. In fact, having to hunt on the state game lands meant beating other people into the woods to get a decent spot. But when I got to the parking area around 4:15 a.m., no one was there. So I walked into the woods, not using a flashlight, only walking by moonlight. I walked through a field into the tree line and started on the path to my spot. I came to the intersection in the path, and one way went left and down the mountain, and the other way went right. I went right because my spot was on the other side, and roughly 50 yards after making the right-hand turn, I smelled what I can only describe as hot garbage. I mean, it hit me in the face like hot dumpster juice in the middle of August. So I stopped dead and turned on my flashlight, expecting to see piles of garbage, but there was nothing. No garbage, nothing dead, just that hot garbage smell. Keep in mind, this is in December, and it's cold out, high 20s, low 30s, so even if there was garbage, it wouldn't smell that bad. So I kind of thought nothing of it, and I followed the path of my spot, which was down over the ridge from the garbage smell, roughly maybe 40 feet down that leads into a grass field where I would sit. I set up my seat and got settled in for about 2 minutes, and that's when a rock started coming down the ridge. The first rock startled me, causing me to turn on my light again, scanning the field hoping to see reflections of deer, but nothing was there again. I sat back down, and another rock comes down the ridge. This time, I stand up and go out into the grass field with my flashlight and the pistol that I carry while hunting. I scan again, and there was nothing. I purposely waited in the field for about 5 minutes, but there was nothing. At this point, I'm getting angry, assuming that another hunter is messing with me because I'm in their spot. I sit down again, and the third rock, sounding larger than the others, comes tumbling down the ridge. I don't get up this time, though, and not 2 minutes after that, another rock, not tumbled, but sounded as though it was thrown off the ridge and landed into the field. And now I'm pissed. I gathered all my gear and started back up the trail to the ridge. I get to the top of the ridge and scan with my light on the whole time, and there's no noise and no other hunter. There's literally nothing up here. I get to the spot where I smell the hot garbage, and this time the smell is gone. And then finally it clicked in my head. It may not have been another person, but possibly something else. I've heard other people's stories of Bigfoot experiences, and a lot of which remarked about how bad they smell. So at this point, I say, screw this, and I ran out of the woods. And to top it all off, there are no other vehicles in the parking area when I get out of the woods. I guess the creepiest thing about this whole experience, though, is that I later came to find out that a coworker of mine had actually seen a bipedal creature cross in front of his car within 2 miles of the location of my experience. So maybe, just maybe, they're real. I don't know, but I definitely had an experience that I'll never forget. This happened at a car shop that I work at a few months ago. For some context, I'm a 16-year-old dude, and I do the dirty work, change oil, clean tools, all that stuff. So I usually work on the far side of the shop and the bay closest to the bathroom. Anyway, in the shop that day was me, Wayne, and Mike, the other guy. His name was Josh, and he called in sick that day. The morning shift goes by normally, and we finish up at work and get ready to go out for lunch. We were about to leave when a friend of my boss walks in and wanted to chat with Mike and Wayne. Well, while they're chatting, I decided to just go wash my hands. The bathroom is on the complete other side of the shop, so I'm kind of secluded over there. When I'm washing my hands, I hear someone walking up behind me. Since we're pretty good friends at the shop, I thought it was Wayne trying to prank me, so I said, "Suck me," but I didn't get a response. At this point, I was actually scared that it was a customer, but I turn around and I see Josh just standing there. He looks pale as anything, bloodshot and wide-eyed. I remember being really confused at this point. He doesn't really do anything for a good 10 seconds, and I'm getting kind of creeped out. And then he says, "Do you have $60? I gotta buy something." I sort of started that I didn't. I had like $250 on me, but I said that he should ask Wayne or Mike. He kind of walked closer to me and said, "Nah man, they already said no," and put his hand on my wrist. Well, I'd like to say that that's when I called for help or something, but I just kind of stood there, frozen. I had no idea if he was going to mug me or kidnap me or what, but I just kind of stood there being a little scared. That's when I guessed that he heard Mike and Wayne coming back, so he just bolted out of the shop. When they saw me, they asked, "Who the hell were you talking to?" and then saw Josh speeding away. So I told them what happened, and they called the boss and told him what Josh had done. My boss ended up calling Josh, but there was no answer obviously, and just left a message telling him that he was fired and to never come back to the shop again. After that whole ordeal, I left the shop to eat lunch in my house, and I got a call from an unknown number. Of course, it was Josh. He asked me for more money. When I said no, he started yelling about how this was my fault, and he just hung up with me. After this, I only worked next to Mike and Wayne, being too scared to work on the other side of the shop alone. So the rest of the week goes by no problem, a little spooked, but there's no other issues. Then my boss gets back and does his weekly check and sees that we're missing $60 from the register, and the revolver to the gun was missing. We already know who did it, so we call the cops on Josh, and we gave them the VIN of the gun and told them everything they needed to know. And after about a week, which I skipped because I was scared that he would shoot us or something, the police told us that he pawned the gun down the street and was caught with heroin. After all of that, I kind of finally felt safe. A few weeks go by and all is well, and I felt safe again, so I started working in my bay on the other side of the shop again. It was getting warm, so we started leaving the hangar bays open while we worked. Bad idea. Well, I was changing the oil in a car by the side of the shop, and alone, a shirtless dude just walks into the bay of my car. I swear to God, this guy had swastikas on his chest, then profane symbols just all over his face. He was covered in tats. Looking back, he was definitely some sort of neo-Nazi or something. Being a Bayesian myself, I was terrified that I was going to be a victim of a hate crime or something. So I grabbed my ratchet thinking that I would swing or something, and instead I just kind of stood there until he walked up really close, looked me over, and asked where Josh was. I nervously told him that he was fired and asked what he needed. He rambled on about how Josh owed him $2,000 and how he said that we had it for about 2 minutes. Then he asked if I had any money. And luckily, that's when Wayne walked in and told him to piss off. He knocked over some tools and sped off in his car. Later that day, around closing time, I got a call from Josh, and I just handed it off to Wayne this time. I don't really know what was said to Josh, but I know that Wayne threatened him enough that we've not had any strange visitors since then. After that incident, though, all is well, apart from the occasional call from Josh asking for money. We locked up the gun and changed the register password. Yeah, Josh was replaced with Chris, and I only work next to Michael and Wayne because I'm anxious as hell now. Whenever I wash my hands, though, I often wonder what Josh's intentions were. It makes me sick to think of what could have happened if my coworkers weren't watching out for me. To this day, I don't know who that neo-Nazi guy was and if he was sent by Josh or if he really was just looking for money. Perhaps he was some sort of hitman or sent there to intimidate me or something. I have no idea, but man, am I glad that this is all done. I'm a 35-year-old female, and my story takes place when I was 15, but man, it feels like yesterday. I'm from a little village in Ireland with a population of a few hundred. The nearest town is about 10 miles away. Growing up in rural Ireland was very idealistic. The summers were spent playing football with the neighbors or going to the lake, swimming till the sun went down. I was lucky that even though the population is small and the houses are far apart, my best friend's house was only down the road, so during the summer months, Mary and I were inseparable. My friend and I grew up with lots of brothers and sisters in a safe village, and we were given a lot of freedom. Sometimes we were gone all day and came back before dark. As it was in the mid-90s, we had no mobiles, but our mums knew that we would be okay and look out for each other. One thing we did like doing during these summers, besides going to the lake and hanging out at each other's houses, was to go down to town and look around the shops. The easiest way to get to town was to hitchhike, as there were no buses there. Here in Ireland, we call it thumbing, but hardly anyone hitches now because most households have 2 cars and parents are a lot more protective these days. But back in the 80s and 90s, it was pretty common. Our parents were okay with it, but there were certain rules that we had to follow. I'm not entirely sure who came up with the rules, but I assume our parents did. The first rule was that we never hitch alone. You must thumb with at least 1 or 2 friends. The second rule was never take a lift if there are 2 or more men in the car. 2 or more women was fine. The third, never take a lift from someone in a van. There could be more guys hiding in the back, or worse, ropes and blindfolds, etc. And the fourth rule was the most important rule. When a car stops to pick you up, always ask the driver where they're going first. If you tell them where you're going first, though, they could pretend that they're going to the same place to lure you in. Now, I'll admit that we were innocent, but we did have some common sense, so we followed the rules down to a T. At least we tried to anyway. My friend Mary and I used to hitch once a week during the summer, and we would go down to town with a population of a few thousand and just look around the shops and eat ice cream and hang out and stuff. When we did get a ride, we had to make small talk with the driver, and as 2 shy 15-year-olds, this bit really sucked the most. To make it fair, we took turns sitting in the front, and the one in the front did most of the talking. But one day, we spent a few hours in town, and it was pretty uneventful, so we decided to thumb back at around 3 p.m. We went to the usual spot to hitch from just on the outskirts of the town, and we were only waiting for about 5 minutes when a white car pulled up. Before we could ask where he was going, he asked us first, and my friend told him, and he said that he was passing through our village on the way to another one. Rule number 4 here was broken, but he seemed nice enough, and we just wanted to go home at this point, and it was my turn to sit in the front. The driver introduced himself as John, a farmer, and he was super friendly. He was dressed in a white t-shirt with holes in it, and he had tattered pants and smelled of cow crap. The car was full of bits of straw and was old and battered, like the driver. He was about 60, I think, and had no wedding band on. I always noticed these things. About halfway between town and our home village, he asked if we heard a noise, and we replied with no. He said that, "There it is again, and it sounds like a banging noise." I didn't hear anything, so I just sat there quietly, and then he said, "I think it might be the exhaust pipe." He pulled up on a busy road and went out to take a look. Mary said, "I didn't hear anything, and he seems like a weirdo." I said they call it intuition, but even though he was super friendly and chatty, I just got a bad vibe from him. The next thing, he comes back to the driver's side and tells us that the exhaust is hanging down and was hitting off the road. He needs us to help him tie it up. It was then that I noticed that he had string holding up his pants instead of a belt, and I thought that this was really odd. Anyway, he got some string off the boot, same colored string as his belt, and we both got out of the car. Although I got a bad vibe from him, I didn't feel scared at this stage, and we were on a busy road, and it was only about 3:30 p.m., so we both got out of the car. He showed us the exhaust pipe hanging down and used an old rag to hold it up because it was hot. My friend Mary took over holding it up while he secured it with the string, and they were both kneeling. Well, I just stood back and watched, and it was then that I noticed that his fly was open, and I could see all of his junk, and he was clearly not wearing any underwear. He didn't even have a belt on, so I guess I wasn't too surprised. In my head, I thought, "Oh crap, what's going on?" But I didn't say anything, I just kind of stood there in shock. But Mary had noticed at this stage and just continued to hold the pipe. When John was standing up, he noticed his fly was open too, and acted all shocked. He said, "Oh girls, I'm so sorry and embarrassed. I only have a safety pin holding the fly together, and it must have come off. Please forgive me and get back into the car." Mary was stunned because she got a real close-up of everything, which left me due to all the talk. Well, I told him that it was okay, and that it was just an accident. Back in the car, the atmosphere was now very different. We both felt mortified, and he kept apologizing over and over again. I just looked at the passenger window and repeated that it was okay. And then he said something that really turned my stomach. He said, "Well, girls, you're taking it really well. And if I didn't know any better, I'd swear you liked it." And then he nudged me in the arm with his arm, like you would do to a friend. I looked at him through the corner of my eye, my face still facing the window, when I noticed that his fly was undone again, and he was exposed all over again. He must have noticed me looking because he said, "Oh, sorry, the safety pin keeps opening. Just don't look." Fine by me, I thought, but I said, "Okay," and just continued to look out the window. But he kept nudging me and saying, "Don't be looking," and giggling at the same time. He was doing this in a really creepy and weird, playful way, like the whole thing was a joke or something. But Mary started giggling too, because when she's nervous, she laughs like that. I knew it wasn't her fault, but I was getting angry at this stage, and he wouldn't stop telling me to stop looking. And then he said, "Your friend is laughing, she must be enjoying the view." This made her laugh even harder. And remember, we're both polite 15-year-old kids that always respect our elders and are a little shy, so I would never speak up to an adult. The nudging in my arm and my friend laughing was all getting too much for me though, and he asked, "Was that the first Willie I'd ever seen?" and told me once again to stop looking. I was turned facing the passenger window so much that I had my back to him, and there was no way that I could be looking. And I just lost my temper at this stage. I shouted at the top of my voice that I'm not looking, and told Mary to shut the hell up. Silence followed. He said sorry, and that he was only joking, and I didn't need to be so serious. I said nothing and just sat there red with temper. I should have told him to just let us out. I should have told him to cover himself up, the dirty old pervert. But I was kind of in shock too, and a part of me wanted to believe that it was all just an innocent mistake. Anyway, we finally arrived at our tiny, safe little village, and we got out. He said again that he was sorry about the whole thing. My friend got her voice back and assured him that it was okay, and I said it was all okay too, and not to worry about it. I said thanks for the lift, and what he said back to me sickened me. He looked me up and down with his creepy smile and said, "Girlies, thanks for everything." And he just drove off. We were left speechless, and we sat down on the nearby bench to just process all of this before just heading home. We made a deal that we wouldn't tell our parents, or they'd never let us hitchhike again. My friend got back her voice and repeated, "Pervert, sicko, smelly bastard," and that he had planned this thing the whole time, over and over. About 5 minutes after sitting down on the bench, guess who drives by, going the direction that we had just come from? Old pervert Farmer John, waving and smiling. Well, we just sat there stunned. He had beeped to catch our attention too, and so much for passing through our village. A few months later, and the ordeal went to the back of my mind. Occasionally we would talk about Farmer John, but we made jokes about it, and we told some of our friends about what had happened. But one day, I told a friend of mine, Brad, and a cousin of hers had told her a very similar story. The cousin lived in another village about 20 miles the other direction from our town. She was a few years older than us too, and while hitchhiking home one day, the same thing happened to her and her friend. The exhaust, the safety pin, and the undone fly. And it was no accident, and my worst fears, they were confirmed. Farmer John, he really was a pervert, which means that we probably got pretty lucky that day when nothing else happened.